Let's see if I can still do this. What's good? Welcome back. Today we are kicking off the next episode in the How to Play Guide, where I pick up a deck, obsessively playtest it, learn the ins, the outs, the matchup guides, the nuances, consider all the techs to help you get good at the Pokemon trading card game rather quickly. Today's video is all about that Charizard Pidgeot love. So quick side point. If you enjoyed today's video, or you think I can improve on some things, be sure to let me know in the comments below. If there's a deck you'd like to see, these do take a bit of time, so be sure to let me know what you'd like to see, and I can do my best to kickstart those. So let's look at our key talking points. The best Charizard ever. We shall see. Some quick maths you should definitely know when playing this deck, and some relevant knockout ranges. The Charizard variants. You think there's just one? We're not going to talk about them all today, but we are going to briefly mention them. Pidgeot effect. What makes Pidgeot stand out in the current format and post-rotation? The skeleton list. How did I get to a starting point? What does it look like? What do I think in the early stages before we start finishing off the list and teching it out for your metagame? Some considerations and techs you might have thought of, you might have tested, or might have completely gone past your radar. How does it look post-rotation? Does the deck die? Does it get stronger? Does it stay the same? We'll talk about that as well. And of course, we're going to focus on the matchup guides for the now, with a small eye towards the future. Japan is just getting into it, so I'm going to throw a few 2 cents here and there into that. And lastly, the long-term outlook. So we're going to play the speculation game. Where do I think Charizard's going to go? Will it age like fine wine, or will we be throwing it out in a couple sets time? Diving right in, is this potentially the best Charizard ever? Well, short answer, I like to think so. And these are the 2 reasons why. So the ability is unreal. Feels like a cheat code. Infernal Rain, when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, search for 3 basic fire energy and attach them to your Pokemon in any way you like. That is 3 free attachments just for getting a stage 2 on the board. So you are committing those resources and it is paying off. So you can set up an attacker for next, or you can set up Charizard here and have 1 to spare. So for 2 of those fire energy, Burning Darkness does 180 damage plus 30 more damage for each prize card your opponent has taken. Those are my key selling points, but let's keep looking at the rest of the card. It has huge amounts of hit points for a 2-prize Pokemon. If you told me when I first started this game that there would be a 2-prize Pokemon with 330 hit points, no extra effects, I never would have believed it. This is massive. This is the staying power. It has bulk for weeks. 330 is one of the best numbers. 340 is the other one that you want to have. You are a tough kill without weakness. Fantastic typing. Since I've started, which is pushing almost 8 years now, Psychic has always been a powerhouse in the format. With the shakeup of the typings, Dark hits Psychic most of the times for weakness. Being a Dark type Pokemon in 2021 would have been great when this was dealing with Mew V Max. I mean, 2 years too late, but whatever. You're finally here. We'll appreciate you while you're here. It accelerates 3 energy. That was the first thing I had to talk about this card, because it is very hard to come by free attachments. And this thing just gives you 3 for evolving. You get multiple, that's 6. What are you going to do with 6 attachments? Whatever. We'll let you speculate on that one. And the best part of the card is the scaling damage. So you hit for a flat 180, which gets all single prizers at the moment, and it gets stronger as the game goes on. So Pokemon has really embraced the comeback mechanic. As your opponent takes prize cards, this thing gets stronger. Charizard is something you have to hit around because you can't go through it. It's just that strong. Speaking of the numbers, I did up a nice little visual image for those of you who like to see things in front of you. When your opponent has taken no prizes, and, you know, early stages of the game, Charizard hits for 180 damage. Just what the card says. Some key Pokemon, Squawkabilly, Mew, Lumineon. No weakness needed. You're knocking those things out, taking 2 prizes. Many aggressive basic decks, looking at Roaring Moon, Miraidon, anything I forget along the lines, they usually play 1, 2, or 3 of these. That's 2 quick prizes while Charizard is hitting for a small number. Let's say they take 1 prize, because we choose to go second, or maybe they have the jump on us because we are a little slower. We then hit Rotoms, Alolan Vulpix, which is starting to see an uptick in Japan, and people will probably dabble with. Raikou, the go-to partner for Miraidon. Darkrai. Many of the new Ace-Spec cards coming in our Temporal Forces set are item cards. Darkrai V-Star will allow you to get those back, so they have to bench the V. So that is a free 2 prizers if they ever whiff that V-Star. Say it's prized, whatever, you name it. Now this is where the magic starts to happen. So this is where you get those aggressive EXs and the Vs to the eventual V-Stars. So that 220, 230, 240, that's where most of those attacker multi-prize Pokemon will fall, and all it takes is 2 knockouts or 2 prizes given up to get there. So you can take out the Tinas before they evolve, and the Iron Hands that tried to take 2 prizes on you early because they're greedy, or the Chen-Pao. It's really, really great. Now Charizard is doing silly things. Unfortunately, we have our first awkward tier. So right now, there's not a lot of Pokemon that fall in that 250, 260, 270 range. I mean, Goldingo is pretty good, so mid-game, you're dealing with that. Goodra is 270, but they're usually damage reduction, but they are a notable card to see. And Esperatha was from Paldean Fates, so that's always a good one to keep in mind. 300. Now this is where you are the scariest thing on the board. All those V-Stars that will see play. I am currently testing the heck out of Lugia, Giratina, Arceus, and Palkia. They are the top of my lists right now because they are proven. They are strong. They have once per game effects that many other cards still love to have in theirs. These are all getting knocked out by Charizard when they have 2 prizes remaining. So slapping out a little bit of hand disruption, they might not be able to get through your Charizard. And of course, other Pidgeots. So they choose to play it, the mirror match, whatever the variant is, you can then knock them out and take their consistency off the board. And while there's nothing directly that comes to mind aside from Charizard, 330 gets pretty much everything in the game. And that's before we include any damage modifications. I didn't talk about any of the ways that you can buff up your damage earlier or make any of those numbers higher. You can fix the math as you need as long as you are keeping in mind your opponent's prizes. So know what to hit when and you'll be fine. Quick talk of the Charizard variants. So as it's Charizard Mania in 2024, we have Charizard Pidgeot in today's video. The next build I am extremely excited to touch upon, Charizard and Bibarel, which allows you to just draw a ton of cards. I think my favorite part of the Pokemon trading card game is just the sheer volume of cards you draw. I've played Magic, I've played Yu-Gi-Oh!, I've played a couple other games, Digimon. Basically, just getting to draw cards is so much fun. Seeing the bottom of your deck through abilities, through supporters, last. I'm all for it, and it's a Bibarel side propaganda channel as well. And the last one, which we haven't seen in a hot minute, but you never know. Lost Box players might have to adapt when we hit rotation, is the Lost Zone engine. So I did cover 3 previous videos on how to play the Lost Box. If you want to jump into those, they are still extremely relevant. There will be elements that kind of shake up with rotation, but the core of the deck is still the same. You can still learn quite a bit from those, just plugging those now. All of these decks rely on different ways of getting to your Charizards, but they all rely on the strengths of the Charizards, whether it's the damage, whether it's the typing, whether it is the ability. Charizard just brings so much to the table in one card, and there's a lot to like. So if you're a Charmander and a Charizard fan, yeah. And for those 1 or 2 Charmeleon fans, yeah. So, Brandon, I know what you're thinking. Isn't Charizard normally expensive? Well, yes. Historically, Charizard cards have been expensive because they're the set sellers, they're the most sought after, they're the one that little Timmy knows the best. I want a Charizard. I have plenty of small nieces and nephews and kids in my life that Charizard is the most recognizable Pokemon for them. That's the one they want to open whenever they buy a pack. They're looking for the sets that have Charizards in them. However, this is the most accessible Charizard I think we've ever seen or will ever see. It came out in August 2023. So that's maybe, what, 6-7 months ago? They gave us 4 printings off the bat. They were really slamming Charizards in that set. Not everybody got lucky, but I'm going to knock on some wood. I got very lucky and pulled quite a few Charizards in the early stages. I have my playset and a few over to spare. But if you're not as lucky, they did print us a Charizard EX box. So the premium collection, whenever they do one of these products, you can buy the product or you can go online and find the promo for dirt cheap. It could be $3, $6, $8. I find the promos are always really cheap because those boxes get opened by collectors or people just offloading them and then selling the singles to competitive players. And then they continued with Charizard hype and they printed a super pretty illustration rare alternate typing of the Charizard. That one is the most sought after at the moment, a couple $100, and then another base art printing. So Charizard is super cheap depending on which one you're looking for. If you want to shell out the money for it, you can pay expensive prices for Charizard. Point is, there's 7 printings of a very good card in about 6 months. You should be able to find one. And it is just speculation, but I 100% believe that we will see a Charizard League battle deck. You'd be crazy not to. The card is statted the best way possible, and it is a popular mon. That will sell off the shelves. It'll be collector's items. It'll be Christmas gifts. I could go on. But anyway, let's keep going on to the next part of the video. So, we're focusing in the Pidgeot effect. So Pidgeot EX is a Pokemon that lets you search once during your turn for any card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. You may only use 1 quick search ability each turn. So that fixes your turn if you're one piece away, or if you need a good reset, or you just need to dump the hand and go. Rare candies become easier to find. Ultra Balls, game-winning cards, you name it. Massive hit points for a support Pokemon. So I think the reason why it's been winning out on the day in the current format is 280 hit points is a weird number to knock out, especially for a support Pokemon. Usually you want to be saving those massive attacks for Pokemon who are going to punch you. If you have to do that to a Pokemon that will very rarely apply pressure to you, kind of feels bad because you're leaving their main attacker unchecked. So it's a weird spot. Do I tackle the Pidgeot and plan for the future? Or do I deal with the thing that is currently hitting me in the face? Sometimes the answer isn't as clear as you'd think. It has free retreat. So when your opponent is taking those early KOs, Pidgeot offers more flexibility on top of its free card per turn by being that free retreat. It's one less thing you have to stress about. Oh, I don't know what I'm going to draw. Who do I promote? Who do I do this? Slot Pidgeot in the active. You can figure it out as you go. It's great. It's one decision less you have to make per turn, and that adds up through the run of a day or run of a tournament. Also, Pidgeot, turn 2 can lead to multiple stage 2s because, like I said, you're searching for that missing piece. You could be a Charizard away. You could be a rare candy away. You could be the Iono away to really break their hand. You could be that game-winning boss away. Pidgeot just, it opens the floodgates. It goes off. You can really have that explosive turn and put somebody on the back foot that a few decks might not be able to recover from, or you can start mounting your comeback with. The elephant in the room for the next 30-ish days, Path to the Peak. So Path to the Peak is an annoying stadium card that says Pokemon with a rule box. Both yours and your opponent's have no abilities. Rule box Pokemon are all of the Pokemon we love to see in the deck. Charizard's ability, Pidgeot's ability, Lumineon, Rotom, they all go away because of this annoying stadium. And it's not just the stadium that gives us fits. It's normally paired with headache-inducing disruption. So 1-2 punch, and they just hope you don't draw out of it. The Judge, shuffle your hand, draw 4. Roxanne, when you have 3, they put you down to 2. Iono, putting crucial cards to the bottom of your deck. It can really leave you looking for some ibuprofen or even just going to touch some grass. How do we deal? First of all, we bounce it with our own stadium. Lost Vacuum is a very good card. It's an item card, very searchable, that just allows you to remove tools or stadiums. Whether you want 1 copy or 2, it's great to have. I think looking for that sliver of an opening, Lost Vacuum is your card to do that. But if you're looking for something a little more consistent, there's Worker. It is a lesser powered supporter, but it bumps a stadium and draws 3 cards, so there's 2 uses in it there. Artisan grabs Pokemon. Whatever you choose to deal with Path to the Problem, you typically want 3 to 5 outs. They're going to be playing anywhere from 3 to 4 outs. Most decks play multiple copies. They don't just slam the 1 or the 2. They do typically throw 3 to 4 at you because they want to see if you falter. Do you stumble? You already have the hurdle of becoming a stage 2. Do you miss a step, and do they get to capitalize on it? So having enough outs means you get to keep playing the game of Pokemon. This is my skeleton. So I usually like to reference Trainer Hill, and I like to try things. And so from my findings and rigorous testing, we have this 50 card skeleton I like to work off of. I'm not going to sit there and say I invented the wheel, but this is the 50 card starting point I would highly recommend for people. The Charmanders all have their uses. 70 hit point Blazing Destruction Charmander allows you to bump a stadium with an attack. We don't mind giving up the first KO, so there's nothing wrong with that. The 70 hit point Promo Charmander lets you hit 40 damage. So if there's something that has maybe 40 or less hit points left, those Shining Arcana Gardevoirs, those Roaring Moons after a Frenzied Gouging, it's a very useful attack. And then, of course, the 1 energy attacking Heat Tackle Charmander from the Obsidian Flame set. Sometimes you just poke. That 30 damage can go a long way, but that's the main gist of it. Your Charmeleons do matter. I like the 70 damage on it for 2 energy. There are some niche circumstances that come up, whether you're trading with 1 prizers, whether you're just finishing off an EX or you're hitting something for weakness. It really depends. I could name all the applications and this would be like a 2-hour video. We're running with Arven's. Arven searches our rare candy, our VIP pass, our Ultra Ball. We're a very item heavy deck. Arven is a very good card. Iono is mostly there for disruption. Playing 3 boss, don't go below 3. You are a very gust heavy deck. After you get your board established, you're usually just bossing every turn until you win. Counter Catcher I have as a 1 of starting. You want at least 1. You could go up for more. Level Ball searches for 90 hit point Pokemon. We're not going to worry about that one too much. 1 Super Rod, 1 Artisan. Artisan is just a good card. I thought of Nest Ball. then I'm looking at the list here, and the skeleton would rather see an Artisan because it's a path bump and a Pokemon search. 6 fire energy, you'd think you'd want more as a starting point. You don't. You don't really care because Infernal Rain gets you the 3, so then you're going to burn 1, 2 for attachment, and you're a very cheap attacking, hard-hitting deck, and it's hard to work through those Charizards. Sure, you'd probably like more for prizing issues, but it's not too bad. 10 flex spots. And what do you do with those flex spots? Well, you look into some text and considerations depending on where your meta is. Rotom V. So Rotom right now is considered but not included automatically in my lists because people are playing Spiritomb. They're countering Snorlax, they're countering Rotom, they're countering Genesect, they're countering a lot of V Pokemon in the format. Sometimes you don't get any value from this Pokemon. And after you've taken 1 prize in the mirror, your opponent can easily gun this thing down. So it's debatable, but it lets you draw 3 cards and end your turn. So it's a good going first option, but Arceus V-Star. So when Charizard first came out, everybody was trying it with the Consistency King. Starbirth, grab 2 cards, evolve up, get a Pidgeot, grab another card. So 3 cards in that magic to turn 2. Arceus may fall in and out of favor. 200 damage for 3 is okay, but again, we're playing a very small amount of energy, so you might have to make it work. Defiance Band. I like playing the deck so when you're behind on prizes, you do 30 more damage. It does give you some room. You don't mind falling behind and catching up. The game is kind of shifting to that. Losing is winning in a sense. Not entirely, but some degree. Professor Turo scenario. I see this here. It denies damage because it allows you to pick up a Pokemon but discard everything to it. It's a switch. It's a damage denier. It's definitely something if you start something that you really don't want to, but it's a supporter, so I'm kind of on the fence with it. Gengar came out in Paldea and Fates. It says once during your turn, you may switch your active with one of your benched Pokemon. If you're really worried about mobility in the deck, you have Turo, you have Gengar, you have switch cards, you have Jet Energy. Snorlax control is pretty tempting to factor this in for, but I'm not sold quite yet. Collapse Stadium. This is one of those other stadiums you usually see in lists. So like Turo, it can take Pokemon off the board. Both players have 4 bench Pokemon, but you, if you play it, have to discard first. Many people don't know that, surprisingly. I'm not overly sold with it. Sometimes I like it, most times not so much. There's better ways to play. Babarrel. Yes, Japan has shown a few lists where you play a 1-1 Babarrel line. Again, I love drawing cards, so I can see its validity. Once during your turn, you can draw until you have 5. Radiant Charizard. There's some very awkward big basic decks like your Roaring Moons, like your Miraidons, like your Chenpaos, where he can carry his weight. Doing 250 and getting cheaper in attack cost as the game progresses is nice to skew that trade, maybe force them to have a boss's orders they don't normally have. Fire typing in case they want to go all grass against you. That is something I've seen people try. And Technical Machine Devolution. Now this is one with a little bit of strategy, a little bit of foresight, and just kind of knowing traditional counts in your cookie cutter list and what to generally anticipate. So this one just says you may use this attack, but the tool falls off at the end of the turn. Devolve all of your opponent's Pokemon and place the highest card in their hand. So if you know they're out of rare candies, if you see that they're struggling to set up, or you've hit into them but you couldn't quite finish them off, well, you can devolution and control your prize trade and really put pressure on resources that they might not have enough to finish out with. I've seen people scoop after hitting them with a well-timed devolution. And if you take 1 prize, if your opponent takes 1 prize, Radiant Charizard can actually use it for free, interestingly enough, because it reduces the attacks, not just Combustion Blast. Now this is the skeleton I'm rocking until we hit rotation time. I went for a Professor's Research because there's games your opponent is floundering and I don't want to touch their hand. If they're popping off, yeah, certainly Iono makes sense, but sometimes I just want to research, let them dig it out on their own and keep going. Radiant Charizard, I just mentioned all the strengths, I love that card. Entei V. So I mentioned with Rotom that people are countering it with Spiritomb. If your opponent counters Entei with Spiritomb, so be it. It's just drawing an extra card. But what my selling points are, it's a 2 energy attack Pokemon, which fits in line with this deck. It hits for fire typing. Again, something we sorely lack because in the early game, Radiant Charizard is still too expensive to keep up with. And it's 230 hit points. So if it's in the mirror match, it takes 2 prizes before they can respond on it. If they have a bulky basic, we can go through, or something that's weak to fire, we can really go. I find Entei fills that second B target for the Forest Seal Stone. Lumineon alone was not enough. I tried just Lumineon and was teching other options, but I found you need 2 V targets if you're going to properly incorporate Forest Seal Stone to get the most value out of it. Because if they're playing Spiritomb, there's nothing worse than playing Lumineon to no effect and having to bench it for 4 Seal Stone. It happens. It really does. But getting the Entei down, 4 Seal Stone, you could still have the potential to attack with it. How I filled out the rest of the list, we went with the Switch because Entei and Radiant Charizard are expensive to move. We went with the double Lost City and a second Super Rod. The Lost City allows us to pick off key attackers that are really annoying for us, or maybe they get benched early, or maybe they couldn't help but start them early. We can just deal with them. They're path outs and they're problem solvers. Lost City might be one of the best stadiums we've seen printed in years behind Path to the Peak. It is just that strong. Let's put it to work for us. TM Devolution, love it. Defiance Band, again, I'm playing from behind. It just is a card that answers more situations than a Vitality Band. Roaring Moon, sneaky, gets away from the Vitality Band, so that one's fallen out of favor. And Choice Belt, there's a lot more EXs that I want to knock on that second turn of the game. And the 7th, Fire Energy. But in case you're wondering, what cards would I look at cutting if you're looking at this list and going, I almost agree with you, Brandon, but I'm not quite there. 7th Energy. I've heard quite a few well-accomplished players make the argument that you only need 6. If you want to cut the 7th and maybe get in a second Lost Vacuum or another Stadium, have at her. Maybe the Entei's looking a little sus, or you're not seeing as much Spiritomb as I am at the time of recording. I get it. Flip-flop that spot. Maybe you think you can get by with your incredible resource management skills, we'll call you Orangaroo, and you only need 1 Super Rod, go for it. If the metagame devolves away from needing a Radiant Charizard, that's another one too. So those are 4 easy spots that I would say, you know what, those are the first cards I cut, or first cards I look at, depending on what you plan to accomplish with your deck. I'm not above hearing suggestions and how you play the deck. By all means, let me know in the comments below. Now let's take a look at the key cards. So in Lost Box decks, there's usually more. Charizard is pretty straightforward. Your Charizards and your Pidgeot. You typically want to be building towards or have on board 2 Charizards and a Pidgeot. The deck becomes pretty self-sufficient after that. You're quick searching your key cards, you're hitting things in the active, and you have a guy lined up ready to go. But usually you want to go with the Charmeleon route, 1 Rare Candy Zard, and then build up with the Charmeleon for the second one. Rare Candy, the most important card in the deck, hands down, no questions about it. I will not be taking any rebuttals. Super Rod, basic energy. Energies are switch cards. They are cards that allow you to attack, general discard fodder. So keeping an eye on them with your Infernal Rain, your Ultra Balls, just in general, keep a tab on them from the early game. If I'm prize checking, I want to see how many are in the deck, and that way I know what I'm working with. How many Super Rods do you have to work with? I find 1 Super Rod gets dedicated to energy, and 1 usually gets dedicated to Pokemon just through the course of a game, or 1 Pokemon, 2 energy, so it gets a little funky there. Lost Vacuum and your Stadiums. So Lost Vacuum is probably the second most important card in the deck, which I can totally get why you play a second one, because it is super searchable off of the Mew, off of the Arven, off of the 4 Seal Stone, you name it. It seems to pop up more often than the Stadium cards after a judge. I don't know. It feels like a bias effect, but they do seem to come up more often. And then, of course, your Stadiums. Knowing when to play which one. Some people just slap it down to get the path bump. Totally get it. Sometimes you see the Artisan in hand. If it really helps your board state, play it. If you feel like it's going to help you in the late game when you have to bump something or you have to, kind of recover and reestablish, do that. Each one has their use. So some quick tips to success. Don't know where we are time-wise, but these are going to be very quick. Go second in most matchups. You see more cards. There's a few exceptions. There's always an exception. Gardevoir and Chien-Pao are the most notable. They're also stage 2 decks. They get an evolutionary advantage. They get to start popping off if they go first. They don't do jack if they go second on that first turn of the game. Sure, they see more cards, but they don't apply a lick of pressure. That may change in 2 or 3 sets time, but right now it does not. Watch your resources. Watch your candies, watch your Devos, watch your vacuums, watch your counter catchers. There's a lot of little things you keep an eye on. I've really had to play the game on hard mode because I discard a few important cards early just to get into the game. That happens. Those don't happen every time, but if you have some semblance of control, kind of put small priorities on those cards. You might play second copies of them if you don't want to do that. Totally get that as well. Respect that decision in deck building. Rare Candy, I'm going to beat this one home every single time, is your most important card. Protect the candies at all costs. Prize map early. But Brandon, that sounds like such a no-brainer. Yes, most decks don't really care what they're hitting into. Charizard unfortunately has to keep an eye on it. Be meticulous in the early game. You're trying to destabilize their board in the early game because we know in the late game our damage output is going to be there. In the early stages, you're doing 180, 210, 240. Maybe pick off a Barrel, maybe pick off a Pidgey, maybe take out that Radiant Greninja that's giving you fits, or that Curlia that they're using to draw cards. Those little Pokemon, the first two prizes usually separate good players from great players. Because if you're just blindly swinging into things, it doesn't always go as well. Build a stable board. I already mentioned this deck is super low maintenance once you get it going. You still need to prepare. The hand disruption is coming. Like winter, it is always coming and you have to be ready for it. So are you ready for that Roxanne? Are you ready for the response KO? Have you prepped for it? What if they take off your Pidgeot? What's your next answer? Are you thinking a couple turns ahead? You have to build out. You need a couple Charmanders, maybe a Pidgeot and a Manaphy, or you need the Entei with the 4 Seal Stone sitting in the wings ready to go in case they decide, you know what? That bird has had its day. It's time to go. Learn from your mistakes. I see a lot of players focus on the outcome. So yes, you lost, but a loss can show you things not to do twice. It might be the hardest way to learn something, but it is definitely a great way to learn. So if you lost, what happened? Was there a momentum swing? Was there a card that I really wanted late that I might have tossed out? Did I maybe put too many rare candies into play early? Did I not bench enough Charmanders? Trust that my opponent's board was not strong enough and I skipped out benching the Manaphy? Or did I pass up dealing with that pesky Sableye because there's no way they're going to play Lost Vacuum and Giratina? Assumptions that you might have made, or the best way to learn is experience most times, or find somebody crazy enough to give you a crash course. So let's take a look at the Dream Start. For the early boards, this is generally what you're working to achieve. We've got the Mew in the active or the Sacrificial Lamb, whatever you want to put up there. Right now it's Mew. It could be anything down the line, whatever utility you want to find. 2 Charmanders. 1, because they could boss up the lone Charmander and then you don't really provide any pressure. 2, they always hang out better in pairs. The Pidgey, because we're looking for that Pidgeot. The 4th spot is a flex spot, but I'll mention the one that I really like to put there. And the 5th one, if I can help it, I like to keep it open for as long as possible. Because it could be Lumineon. It could be those V Pokemon. I'm telling you really not to bench until you have to. Manaphy 9 times out of 10 is that 4th Pokemon. If I think they're going to play a Greninja, I'm going to bench it. Greninja is such an oppressive card. It's great, but God, is it annoying. Manaphy just covers your bacon. The last one, though, again, usually fills out the spot. If we think they're going to apply pressure on a Pidgey, because it's the most appealing option on the board, right? I'll bench a second one. Or if I really had to push and get set up, I'm playing Lumineon because I needed to get set up, and I'm accepting the fact that it is the most likely thing to get knocked out on my next turn. It is. It is a tempting 2 prizes, and your opponent will chase it, because then it's Lumineon, double Charizard. That's usually their roadmap. Post-rotation. So we're going to quickly touch upon it. It is getting here in about a month's time. Hopefully it doesn't take me a month to get to the next video. Level Ball, Mew, Battle VIP Pass, all cards we're losing. It's really unfortunate, really sad. Well, you know, pour one out for the homies. But time to rejoice, because that dang path to the peak after 2 years is gone. All those Roxanne path judge plays, they're going out the window. The Charizard Pidgeot will be unchecked going forward. But I'm not just going to leave you there. We're going to take a very, very brief moment to talk about Temporal Forces. So it's coming out at the end of March. It is the post-rotation set that we really get to look into. It has the return of ace specs. It has some very good cards. Charizard gets access to one of these lovely cards that really helps it kind of stay on the course. Buddy Poffin, think of it this way. It is Battle VIP Pass that you can use throughout the entire game, but the only Pokemon it can search are Pokemon with 70 hit points or less. They slot right in, they take the VIP spots. That was usually the biggest thing most decks are losing going into the rotation, not Charizard. Mist Energy. This one is kind of niche, but I figured it was worth mentioning. It prevents the effects of attacks done to the Pokemon this card is attached to. So Roaring Moon and Giratina have effects that knock out a Pokemon regardless of the hit points. Mist Energy, in theory, allows you to block that, assuming they're not trying to counter that. But it could be interesting. I've seen a few Japanese lists play it. It's probably going to fall out of favor and you're not going to worry about it, but whatever. And then now it's time to talk about the ace specs. So the first one on the left is Prime Catcher. Switch your opponent's active with one of their bench. If you do, switch your benched with your active. So it is a switch card and a boss's orders in one. It is one of the first new ace specs. Ace specs, you're only allowed to have 1 ace spec total in your deck. Not 1 copy of each or whatever. It's 1 total. So you have the choice of either Prime Catcher or my favorite and go-to, Maximum Belt. Maximum Belt says your active Pokemon does 50 more damage before weakness and resistance to the opponent's active EX Pokemon. So I went through the chart of all the relevant damage numbers you should be keeping tabs on. Maximum Belt lets you chase those bigger numbers sooner. I'm not going to give you off every example. By all means, if you didn't already take a screenshot of that chart, take the Maximum Belt, look at that chart, and see all of those pesky numbers that now look even better. So Maximum Belt, I am a big fan, and that is my go-to A-Spec for Charizard. As you can see post-rotation, the list looks pretty similar to what was going on. Charizard remains relatively untouched. With the loss of Path to the Peak, we can kind of ease up on our Stadium cards until they reveal something else. So what I did when I took out those Stadium cards and those Path bumps is I opted for a second Counter Catcher. Playing from behind is something this deck really loves to do, so having 3 Boss and 2 Catcher means we were prepared for any situation that comes in our way. We have a second Charmeleon, I'm getting to it. 1 Energy Search to search for the energies. Because it's item-based, it's Arven searchable. We are losing the Mew, so it never hurts. I've seen a few people go for a Seal Stone, grab a basic Fire Energy. It happens from time to time, but, you know, Arven, Energy Search, and the Stone means you can at least free it up. But where I'm making my notable change is Technical Machine Evolution. So I cut the Jirachi to get in a second Charmeleon, and we can do this because we still want to go second. We need a going second on the first turn attack. Technical Machine Evolution, it makes whatever Pokemon is sitting in our active more useful. It allows us to go into double Charmeleon. It takes pressure off our rare candy. It makes that devolution play a lot less effective, which is why I cut the devolution and focused more on damage output. If you feel like Defiance Band's not needed, whatever. There's going to be a few V-Stars running around, so I kept it, and they are going to try to apply pressure early because their V-Star powers are just really, really good. 7 Fire Energy and 1 Collapsed. Collapsed, I might just cut, but you never know if you want to discard Lumineon. Lumineon feels like a liability post-rotation more so than it is now, because with decks just having easy ways to get their Gust and very few ways to really disrupt outside of, you know, supporter, but whatever. Play more boss, play more catchers. Maybe getting Lumineon off the board isn't so bad. That's my early post-rotation list. You get a 2-for-1 today. And now we're going to dive into the matchups for the now. So we're going to try to rattle off through these rather quickly. Apologies in advance if I miss anything. Feel free to let me know what strategies you're using down below. Mew V Max. So it's not quite gone at the time of recording. Hold your path outs. This is one of those filthy decks that loves to abuse the Judge Path combo. That'll really make you throw up your hands. Sometimes you can't control it and they just have both. It is very hard for them to deal. First one, they can probably power tablet their way through the first one. Second one is very tough to get out unless they're playing some sort of grass package, which I very rarely see. Rotation. If you're sick and tired of this deck, just wait it out. We are, T-minus like 30-something days and counting. This deck will finally be gone. Its reign of terror is quickly coming to an end. Don't worry, we're almost there. The key cards of the matchup. Lost Vacuum, I find is super searchable between the Mews and the Arvens. You can really get that path out. You only need one sliver of an opening to get either a Pidgeot online or get a Charizard on the board, and then you have them on the back foot and they're scrambling just to deal with that giant lizard. Mew is a great sacrifice and search, and Arven just grabs a lot. It could grab the stone, it could grab the vacuum, it doesn't really matter. It grabs a lot. That's Mew in a nutshell. Next up, another rotating archetype, Rapid Strike. Hasn't seen much play, but there are still a few players out there who like to capitalize on the Gardevoirs, the Chempows, and the Charizards. So how do you beat this one? Take out the Remoraid/Octillery. The deck is very combo reliant. It is probably the most combo heavy deck in the format. It did win NAICs. It has been a strong contender all year. If you take out the Octillery, the deck gets very difficult to pilot because you're not getting your Rapid Strike cards. I mean, you can still get around it, but it is really tough. Consistent hand disruption. A good Iono with the Octillery knockout makes things a lot easier for you. Keep an eye on the Yoga Loop or the Devolution play. So when you've taken out the Octillery, they are going to start to get desperate, and they're going to look for that home run play. That's what they're going to look for. Yoga Loop doesn't scare me as much if I have a lot of Charmanders in play, if they haven't been accumulating damage rather quickly. I mean, usually Yoga Loop in the early stages hurts more than in the late stages, but in the late stages, they're looking for the Devolution. So if you can take out the Radiant Alakazam, or you can constantly be spamming their hand with no Octillery, or they've been missing double gunners, it's very hard for them to take you out. I love to Lost Zone that Radiant Alakazam and just make things difficult. Octillery, I don't really care as much, but Radiant Alakazam makes things difficult because they're going to go for 7s or 5s, Devolution, try to take you out. You got to be keeping an eye on that because we don't play any healing. Some key cards in this one, but don't bench them too early. is Manaphy. If you feel like they can grab a Yoga Loop turn, Jirachi's always nice to have, but again, if it's down too early, they will double gunner it. Manaphy, again, once you see the Urshifu or you think the Urshifu's coming, then maybe bench it. And Iono. Iono is the strongest card in the deck here because it's going to be messing with them and it's going to be forcing them to have it off of some ugly 6s or 5s or 4s. Chenpao. So we are talking about this one. This one feels free, but it can go either way. Go first when possible. If you win the coin flip, you've got a huge advantage going into this matchup, and then it's just a matter of draws. They play very little disruption. Target the Baxcaliburs. I'm not trying to disrespect anybody who plays the deck, but they play almost a cookie cutter list. You could almost rhyme from memory the cards that they play. 4 Pokestops, the Retrievals, the 2 Baxcaliburs, the 2 Frigibacks, the 170 hit points, the 3 to 4 Chenpaos, the Iron Hand, the 8 to 9 Water Energy, maybe the 1 Lightning, your 4 Cross Switchers or Switches, like 2 Super Rods, like the Ultra Balls, Iridas. You know what I mean? Like, I can name it almost by memory and just recreate the list. These are pretty much known counts. They play 3 Frigibacks and 2 Baxcalibur. Target those Baxcalibur, it makes them very difficult to hit you, because if they don't have them on board, Charizard becomes a menace. Track their rare candies. They don't even play 4 rare candies or to go with the 3 Baxcalibur. Again, I'm not hating on Chenpao. I do like the deck, but I find a lot of the lists are pretty much like copy paste with no variation or no difference. So it's very easy to track their resources. So track their candies when you know they're down to two used, or they have 1 left. It could be in the prizes. They might be out of Pokemon, and that is what it is. So they're looking for speed. They're looking for quick knockouts. Some key cards. Lost City. You put a Baxcalibur in there, no amount of Super Rod is getting it back. Devolution, I mentioned, is just as good as an attack. It can really set them back if they've tried to double Baxcalibur just to avoid you from gunning down the one they have in play. A smart Chenpao player might just go a couple Frigibaxes and hold the candies rather than constantly be playing them. But then Iono gets a little bit of strength. So then they're just constantly cycling and digging, and it's just an interesting game of like back and forth of, oh no, you do it, no, you do it, and the devolution really helps. Boss's orders, again, because we need to knock out what we need. Try to combination off the boss with the Lost City, so that way they can't just super rod it and negate your KO. Next up, we talking the boogeyman of the room, Snorlax control. Oh. All right, you ready for this very in-depth game plan? You're gonna concede. I don't know what to tell you. You have to deck build accordingly. Right now, it's like 2-3% of the metagame. If you think it's going to be a problem, by all means, prepare for it. I am taking this one as a strategic loss, and if it sees more play, like it might in post-rotation, then I will start to factor more cards in. Charizard is just not built in its current state, especially the Pidgeot build, to deal with Snorlax. Maybe not even with the Bibarel or the Lost Zone engine, but still, we don't play enough switch cards. So your key cards, none. Moving on, because we're not going to let that get us down. Miraidon EX. This one feels like a very, very good matchup. There's 2 builds running around at the moment. Path to the Peak or Beach Core Peony. Both of them will still see shakeups post-rotation, but we're going to focus on the now because we don't know how Miraidon adapts. It's losing a lot of tools. Avoid benching 2 prizers early. Prioritize 2 to 3 Charmander. Pidgeot is not as much of a priority in this matchup, so you have freedom and bench space to get your Charmanders. I don't think there's any bench snipers, so Manaphy shouldn't see the board. Jirachi shouldn't see the board. Mew will probably help you out, but it is what it is. They're going to try to smack you with an Iron Hands. There's a few players that will push for that early Iron Hands to try to put you on the back foot and say, you know what, I'm going to watch your board crumble. So what you're going to do is they're going to do it. They're going to amp you very much if they don't whiff horribly. Save your Lost Vacuum for their Iron Hands. They're usually going to pair it off with the Big Charm. They're going to take 2 prizes, hit themselves in 240 range. This is when you want the Lost Vacuum and a Burning Darkness 240. They've burned 2, maybe 3 electric generators to try to set that guy up, and then there's nothing left in the back foot. Next up, it's not in every deck, but it is worth mentioning if it is in the deck you're playing against. Take out Coco EX. Please Lost Zone this gosh darn deck or hold on to your key switch card. So Coco EX has this very annoying attack for 30 damage and 2 energy. It does 90 more if your opponent took a knockout the previous turn. If they did, paralyze them instead as well. So they're trying to 2-hit KO your Charizard. It can be problematic, could be the Pidgeot, whatever, but basically they're accounting on the fact that you don't play any switch cards or you have very little mobility in your deck. If you play Turo, whatever. But I find this card sits on the bench and they're just like, whatever, knock out the hands or knock out something small. This is a cheap Pokemon I can use to buy back turn that I just lost from you. So if you can get rid of it, it's 1 knockout, then you're fine. Coco is just one of those cards that has been a small annoyance for me, and I had to at least vent out my frustration since I've got your attention. Key cards. Radiant Charizard allows you to uptrade 2 for 1. Rhydon, Hands, Coco, all under 250. Lost Vacuum brings them back down. Switch card, again, we play it for that reason, so it's good there. We're going to keep moving along. Another big, basic, heavy deck, which seems to be the trend for Paradox Rift, but whatever. Ross Cawthorn has really given us the gold standard on how to play this deck. People have been picking it up. It goes really fast. It just out-tempos a lot of decks. Brace for impact, don't bench Vs. This deck is the clear-cut example of wanting to go 2-2-2. They want to go, I don't know, your Lumineon or your Entei or your Rotom, and then a Charizard, then a Charizard. Frenzy Gouging doesn't care how big your hit points are, you're going down. Bench wide and double up. Double Pidgey, double Charmander, and for good measure, bench the Manaphy to be safe. So I've seen it through, I believe it's Zapdos TCG, did very well with it. Top 32, playing a couple water energy, plenty of energy switch, just so you can utilize the Radiant Greninja and its gatekeeping Moonlight Shuriken. So if you don't bench for it because you're like, oh, they're going to play 9, I'm telling you, safe than sorry, bench the Manaphy. You'll thank me later because I feel like it should catch on. If I was going to play Roaring Moon, and the card has not really appealed to me, it would be incorporating 2 to 3 water and all those E-switches. Just gives you an extra layer. Chase the support Pokemon. So this is another one of those decks that will play the Squawks, the Mews, the Lumineons, just to fill out their board. They don't have a draw engine, so they have draw Pokemon. So if you can get one of those early, that's your first 2 prizes. What we're trying to do is let them take a 1 prize Pokemon. Then we're trying to respond with a Charizard or an Entei and take a 2 prizer. And then they're going to take the 2 prizer and fall down to 3. We're going to take another 2 and fall down to 2. Give them that 1 awkward KO. The matchup gets a little interesting if they opt to play the 1 copy of Emergency Jelly and Booster Capsule. Not all decks play it. Many are going for speed rather than this kind of defensive element. Booster Capsule makes it a 290. Jelly kind of prevents our Charmanders from getting that nice KO. That's fine. We play the Radiant Charizard. We have windows to uptrade, but it does make the matchup a little more interesting if they do opt to play it, because they could get double gouging out of 1 Roaring Moon. Key cards for this one, Radiant Charizard because it's uptrade potential, Boss's Orders because we're looking for those support Pokemon, and Counter Catcher because sometimes it buys us a turn to catch up, or we can chase those down while we're hitting with the Iono or the Arven. They get to a really small hand size early, an Iono Counter Catcher can mess them up. Maybe take out the Mew, leave the Moon, let them gouging, then knock them out, and they don't have a response. Sure, they have the KO next turn, they don't have anything the turn after, because they've burned so many damn cards. That's all my piece on Roaring Moon. Gholdengo EX, this one has popped up, this one is kind of middling. It is okay, it's not quite there. Post-rotation, it does get better, but it plays pretty much the same with a few nice new cards, so it was worth mentioning. Go first when possible. They do absolutely nothing when they go second. They don't apply any pressure. You can then take the first knockout, which is fine. Lost City the Greninja. If they play it early, take it away from them. They play very janky, very awful draw support. They don't play Iono, they don't play Research, they play weird draw 3 plus effect type cards. And if you can take that away early before they're set up, you've just taken away their key draw Pokemon. Lean on fire attackers. This is why I love the Entei. He double dips in case Gholdengo ever catches up. I mean, he deals with a lot of other 220, 230 Pokemon, but he can deal with the Gholdengo until Charizard is strong enough for the mid game. Radiant Charizard again till the mid game, then gets even stronger in the late game. Gholdengos plus Iono go better than peanut butter and jelly. Kid you not, go ahead, try it for yourself. See how good it feels when you take out a coin bonus, a key attacker, and slam them with an Iono, knowing their Greninja is already in the lost zone. Really, really good. And Gimme Ghoul bonus. Do not touch the Pokestop. It is the carrot dangling in front of you. It is awfully tempting. It might feel really good if you hit anything. 9 times out of 10, you are going to send crucial pieces that cost you the game, and that will be the key mistake. Do not touch the Pokestop. It is a stadium that you need to ignore. I don't care how tempting it is, unless you are going to lose. And I mean, like, you're going to get donked if they just knock you out. Do not touch it. Key cards for the matchup. Manaphy, because if they go first, they're going to look for that Greninja play because they're going to try to take you out before you set up. Entei, because it deals with your Gholdengos, and they can farm it with Palkia, but they're actually helping our Charizard for the mid game. Radiant Charizard, again, is another uptrade opportunity. If you're taking their coin bonuses off and taking 2 prizes, you're doing very, very well. It's a funny one, so you might have to take a 7 prize game on this one. Destabilize the board with precise early knockouts. Arceus variants. This is the deck of middle damage, consistency is king, and judge path cheese. So people are playing it over in Japan, but they don't have access to path. So many people are just like, you know what, I'm going to take that Japan list and slam in a couple copies of Path of the Peak. So for the now, it's good to know about. For the future, I believe it finished 2nd place. So out of 2,600, which is good to keep in mind. Go first when possible. They don't do anything really on that second turn if they go first. These are all the possible variants. Quick talking points. Goodra likes to be a tank. You can reset that effect with a boss and a counter catcher. Giratina hits like a gosh darn truck. I'm not quite sure. They are playing the Iron Leaves, but we do play some fire attackers, so we can at least trade even on those. And then when they get down to that 3 or 4 prizes taken, we can choice belt, swing back at them. Armarouge looks like it's going to become the play a bunch of little attackers and accelerate energy, plan according for the situation. Alolan Vulpix, we don't have a clean answer. I might have to go for the drawing board on that one, but it prevents damage from all Pokemon with an ability, and I think our entire deck has abilities, so that could be problematic. I mean, you can play Spiritomb and really mess with your opponent, but whatever. They all exist. Anticipate Disruption. This is the deck that loves to spam Judge. Coming from a former Arceus bot, they love it. It can break their board. You still have Starbirth in the back pocket, or you have a draw engine on board. So, look for those barrels. If you take their draw engine off the board in those first 2 prizes of the game, it makes their judges more impactful for them. They're less likely to play them because they can't dig out of them. They're less likely to play an Iona late if they can't draw out of it, or Squovit, becomes useless if they don't have the barrels on board. So that's another prize you can scoop up. Resist 2-hit KOs when possible. Most times, they're going to want you to attack the Arceus, or they're going to want you to attack the Goodra. That's fine. We're not ready for it. We'll go around it. Those first 2 prizes are very big. Charizard is going to eat a hit from most of these Pokemon and then do another one. So make those first 2 KOs count. But if you have to do it, chase a benched, unevolved V Pokemon. If they rebench the Arceus because of Asheron's Care, or if they rebench Pokemon because of Turo's Scenario, go for those. Smarter, not harder. Endgame, you can hit them hard as you want. Key cards, 4 Seal Stone. I've yet to see an Arceus list playing Lost Vacuum. Lost City, again, put those Pokemon where they belong. And Boss's Orders, we are very particular. We're playing extra counter catchers, so we can reset the Vulpix's effect. We can reset the Goodra's effect. They're not quite unwinnables, but they're definitely one you have to be a little careful with. Don't worry, I trust in you. Lugia V-Star. So this is one we should talk about for the now and the future. Lugia pretty much plays the same. Post-rotation, just gets a couple new tricks in the bag. Go second when possible. We don't care about the first prize given up. Play from behind. It activates our Burning Darkness, it activates our counter catchers, and it allows us to save our supporters for setting up. Look for small 2-prizers. Mews, Squawks, Lumineons. They're typically playing them to get their Burnett's or to get their Jacques or to get whatever. If they don't play them and they had a very good draw or the Capturing Aromas have been kind to them, coin flips suck, whatever, go for the Archeops. Once you know the Archeops are off the board, they only have so many energy. Then they have to manually attach. Then it's so much easier to plan for. A pretty predictable deck. You just kind of figure out where it likes to function and take that from it. Ignore the V-Star. It's only hitting you for a flat 220. If they still have powerful colorless and they're hitting you for like 300 or 330 or something, big whoop. 220 or even 270 with the belt isn't very scary. So they'll get 2 hits on us. That's fine. The Charizard should have done its damage by the time it goes down anyway. And then we can start looking at other ones. Mew EX and Weirdeer are the current closers. I'm not sure how well their jobs will be intact post-rotation, but after they've taken 2 prizes, both of those Pokemon sit in victim weight. They are under 260 hit points, and they are free for the taking from Charizard. So go get them. Key cards, Charizard, he just has that massive beefy bulk to take him down. I don't see any grass attackers on the horizon quite yet. Boss's Orders is your friend. Go get him. And before we move on to the next deck, it's time to talk about Lugia's best friend that hasn't been released yet. Chinchino took down a 2,600 person event. For special role is the attack you want to keep an eye on. It does 70 damage for each special energy card attached to this Pokemon. 5 energy, get the Charizard EX. So if you're following your game plan early and attacking those Archeops, maybe that works. Maybe they get the Chinchinos and you can't do that. But we have to have a backup plan. A card that is sitting in my bulk but is ready to pull the trigger on is Delphox V. It has an attack that does 120 to the active and 120 to the bench. We're not looking to uptrade here. We're looking to keep pace and take those Chinchinos out. If we have to make them respond to it with a Lugia, so be it. But it's also a 4 Seal Stone target, so it could take the place of Entei in my current list. Next up, we are looking at Lost Zone Box. So I spent 3 videos talking about it. I have flipped. Now it's time to take them down a peg. Look to identify the variant. Lost Box can play multiple ways. Is it Greninja or is it Charizard? Once you've identified that, you'll realize whether you need Manaphy or not. Watch their counts. So 4 is Cramorant, which isn't as scary. 7 is Mirage Gape. We really don't know what they could do. They could go Moonlight Shuriken. They could go Iron Hands. They could go Tropius. Whatever. They could find something out of the blue. There's bulk attackers they could use. Keep an eye on the count. 10 is Sableye. When they're in 10, then you probably should be putting Jirachi down because that Lost Mine could really tear apart your board because the Radiant Charizard build is going to play 2 TM Devos. So keep an eye on your rare candies and Lost Zone Sableye if you can help it. Many decks are getting greedy and only playing 1 because many decks are playing Jirachi. If you can Lost City it, put it away for good, you're doing better. You're doing better than most. Conserve resources. Rare candy, they're going to try to make you burn them up. I like using Entei here because it's a 3-hit KO. So if you can knock out the Cramorant, force out the Sableye early to respond or something else, then we can immediately Lost City, get rid of that problem, and it's fine. Or we can take 2 hits with the Cramorants if they try to double up on us. Then retreat, put it with the Jirachi, and make them have to gust it because they can't Lost Mine finish it off. And if somebody plays Clap Stadium or you play Clap Stadium, you can get rid of it. Entei pulls its weight in Lost Box because it doesn't care about technical machine evolution. That's another reason why I liked it. They're going to be looking to really tear apart your Pidgeys and tear apart your Charizards. Disruption. So what I mean here is don't just be slamming Ionos because you think the card's pretty and you want to get a lot of cards. No. If they're popping off and they're quickly getting 2 counts, if they end turn 1 with 3, or if they're ending turn 1 with 4 or 5, or turn 2 is closing in on a 7, hit them with an Iono, slow them down. They've got a lot of good cards. They're not going to be able to draw back into them rather easily. Take them from. If they're floundering, let them flounder. Let them dig their way out of it. You have 3 Iono. You have 3 opportunities to really steal the momentum with that card. Key cards, Lost City, take the good ones. Iono, put the good ones out of their reach. And Jirachi, keep Sableye away from you. Fetch keys to Lost Box, really doesn't matter what it is. As long as you don't brick horribly or intentionally throw, you should be fine. Gardevoir EX. So this one is a dicey. It is 50-50. I'm not going to sit there and pretend like it's not. Good Gardevoir player might be able to play circles around you, but a lot of the times they're also playing with the stage 2 hurdle. I love this one. Go first when possible. Lost City key pieces. So their key attackers are Shining Arcana, Gardevoir, and Zacian V. So they play 2 Arcana and 1 Zacian. We don't really know what Gardevoir looks like post-rotation or if it's even going to survive, but right now you're focusing on that because it's one of the best 5 decks in the format. Don't worry about the Curlias. Curlias are bait. Try to deal with the Shining Arcanas for your Lost City. First one, second one, there you go. Then they're forced to play Zacian. Late game will deal with the Zacian. Zacian's not scary until they have 8-9 energy in the discard pile. Play from behind or even. Gardevoir is one of those decks that like to utilize the comeback mechanics. They want to use reversal energy, so if they're behind on prizes, the Shining Arcana gets 3 energy plus 6 gets 9, means Charizard's going down. So if we play even, that card is pretty much useless. Countercatcher. Most decks are only playing 1 copy of Boss. I'm guilty of 1 Boss. I've had a few people in my ear telling me Gardevoir needs more Boss because Countercatcher can be played around. You can take that from them. And then they have nothing in the mid game or the late game when you decide, you know what, I'm going to put the foot on the gas and take your board apart. Let's go. Watch for the stall play. This is a very lazy one. So I see Charizard players go, oh, they don't have anything. They're kind of slow. And then you take a couple KOs and then they go Countercatcher, boss up something awful, and then you start Screamtail picking apart their board. Or Cresselia starts softening things up or bringing the Charizards down and really mounting your comeback. Watch for that one. If you can help it, maybe keep your switch, maybe just try not to fall victim to that because it can happen. Because you only play 1 switch card, right? So it can be a little bit of an issue. So key cards. Charizard, you're a behemoth. 6 energy plus reversal gets knockout from their Shining Arcanas. If you play around the reversal, they have to work harder and it is very difficult. Lost City makes big attackers go away. Maybe they bench a Gardevoir EX too early. Lost City that. Make them have 1. Then you know when it is, and then they constantly either have to be picking it up or it's gone. Boss's orders, we play more than them, we can be more aggressive than them. Charizard EX. Mirror Match is such an intricate one. You could probably do 3 videos on its own talking about this, but I'm going to try to leave you with a few bullet points for success. Go second when possible. You don't care about the first KO. Again, avoid benching V Pokemon. They're victim weight, they're easy things to take down. Play from behind or even. Because your Burning Darkness gets stronger than theirs, you have more options, more things to KO. It just really helps you in the long run. Watch their rare candy count. Some players will aggressively put 2-3 candies down early. That means you only have 1 to worry about. We have a couple options. Be the first player to KO the Pidgeot. This is almost a game of chicken. You don't want to fall into this. So by letting your opponent take the first KO, maybe you decide, oh, that Lumineon's looking pretty good. So then you take 2 prizes. You don't want to fall down to 3 prizes or 2 prizes remaining first unless you have a sizable lead. Because whoever takes out the Pidgeot can usually come back and steal the game. Because once the Pidgeot's gone, right, every Iono hurts even more. And you've already burned so many candies trying to get back into it that they're so hard to find. Devolution can be just as good as a KO. My favorite is going, let's say we take 2 small KOs. One of my Charizards is going down. If I want to really go for it, I can either devolution to force out their last rare candies, or I can do it at the end when I know all 4 candies have been used. Because they can only really recover a Pidgeot or a Charizard. They can't really recover both. So devolution can be very strategic. It can also bait them to fall into that free prize turn, because if you put the Devo on something small like a Charmander, then you kind of dare them to fall in, and then all of a sudden their Pidgeot is in trouble. Some key cards here. Devolution, sometimes better than an attack. Rare candy, again, 4, most important card of the deck. Defiance Band, it's just a good comeback card. Matchup is something you should probably be comfortable with. Charmeleon is a very skilled play, so trying to build up the second one, but also don't put your Lost City down until after you've maybe taken theirs from them. Like Lost City, losses orders their Charmeleon, then you know they're playing with set resources. Make them bump your Lost City first before you put yours down. Or if you can put yours down, do it safely. Okay, Giratina, we are getting to the end, I swear. I apologize in advance. Giratina, we're going to be very quick. Go second when possible. Don't mind giving up the first prize. Time your disruption. If they're running hot, take it from them. If they're floundering, leave them be. Don't rush to 3 prizes. They're going to Roxanne Path you, and they're going to mount a incredible comeback. Like, we can watch it on stream time and time again. If you fall victim to Roxanne, that's on you. You know better. Roxanne Path is coming when they have 3 prizes, so make the most of your first 2 knockouts. And then make sure that big KO is worth it. The one that brings you down to 2 prizes or down to 3 prizes has to be worth it, because if it's just a KO for the sake of KOs, you've done and screwed up. Watch their Lost Zone count. 7 is when this deck comes alive. 10 is kind of the closing Star Requiem out of nowhere. Lost Zone key attackers. Big ones I like to take out are Greninja for draw when I bump stadiums, and Sableye. Once they've been taken away, then things are going pretty well. Outside of that, it doesn't really matter. Prepare your board for the late game. Again, Roxanne is coming, Winter is coming, brace yourself for impact. How do you plan on dealing with the lost impact? I like to have a couple Charizards lined up. That way, when they fall to 3, I can Defiance Band, knock out the Giratina. I fall to 2, then they Roxanne, but I have a Charizard on the back line ready to go. So no matter what they do, I have a Charizard ready to punch them in the face, and there's nothing they could do. Because I've already dealt with their Sableye, I've already dealt with their Greninja. If they didn't bench them, good for them, because it is what it is, but usually they have to play those early in order to deal with Charizard. I've played a lot of Giratina. So your key cards, Lost City, Iono, Manaphy, Jirachi. This one takes some thinking, because sometimes Giratina beats itself, other times Giratina does some superhuman things, and you're just going, whoa, that is why it's arguably one of the best decks in format. So Manaphy, when you think a Greninja is coming, Jirachi, once they hit 7 cards in the Lost Zone, you should be putting Jirachi into play. Anything less than that, because Culver's is 2, double Comfey. You can argue anywhere between 6 and 7 cards in the Lost Zone is Jirachi time. If they end their turn between 3 and 4 cards in the Lost Zone, because they don't usually play Lost Vacuum. Another one to note is Entei with the Force Seal Stone is good, because it either draws attention to the Entei and saves the Charizard, or they can't deal with the Entei and they have to deal with the Charizard. So take your pick. So Entei with the Force Seal Stone and the Pidgeot on board is pretty good. Like they really have to answer, and a lot of decks are cutting down to 2 boss and 1 counter catcher. So yeah. That's Giratina in a nutshell. It is, you still got to play the game's Pokemon. Nothing's free. So we have reached the end of the video. Ooh, take a breath. So what do I think? Charizard is extremely well positioned going into the future. It is future proofed. It has the typing. It has the 2 energy attack cost. I did a stage 2 what to look for many years ago now, probably one of my first videos. What to look for: incredible ability, a scaling attack we've touted highly. It has many tools to work, and I'm going to cover multiple profiles on the deck because it is just good. So it is very good going into the future. It is dual typed. So right now it is primarily dark type, but give it time. They've given us a Charizard from 151. There are fire types in the format that you can easily accelerate to. There are like 2-3 energy attack costs. So you have fire, you have dark, you cover your own weaknesses in-house. Acceleration engine. Anytime you can accelerate multiple energy. Right now Charizard might be having its day as the face of a deck, but I wouldn't be surprised if maybe in a year's time it pivots over to a acceleration-based attacker that kind of cleans up in the late game. It happens. Pokemon does that. Depending on how they decide to shift it, you should see. We will see. Charizard has the plot armor. Let's be honest. We're talking about Charizard in February. Would you be surprised if Charizard is in the finals or doing very well at the World Championships? I wouldn't. Charizard got that plot armor. It's here to stay, and it is going to be the next menace that we should be keeping an eye on for the 2 years it'll be legal. We're going to talk about Ogerpon briefly, so I imagine it'll be the next thing we get in May 2024. We have seen nothing on it. All I know from the video games is it has multiple masks, it can change types. I'm going to speculate that maybe it gets tool cards that allows it to change its type, or it might be the Pokemon that introduces tool cards that allow Terra Pokemon to change their type. We don't know. We really don't know, but I imagine they're going to make it grass to just balance things out, or water type would really kind of drop the ball, but whatever. I don't really see many grass Pokemon aside from that one. And what's next? So you made it to the end of this video. I just want to say thank you. Apologies in advance for it being so long. We are working on the how to play Charizard Bibarel with the technical machine evolution. This one I have been waiting for since early November to get done because I love the TM evolution. So if you enjoyed the video, let me know. If not, let me know what I did wrong and I could work on. And until next time, guys, take care and have fun playing Pokemon. Cheers.